Yes. Hi, I'm Javier Duran, Director of the Conference Center. Welcome. Woo! Where are we? The classroom? No, we're at the playground, downtown, our home away from home, once a month. And we want to thank their support and their service and their excellent reception. We've been working with the playground for a number of years, and this is an excellent venue to bring the work of our colleagues and our grad students to the community in an informal setting. And I hope you enjoy your time here this afternoon. And I want to first thank our team, the Conference Center team, which really makes everything possible here. And in particular, Jamie Mans has been doing an amazing job coordinating the events. So thank you for the hard work and everybody in the team. And also I want to acknowledge some of our friends here tonight. Bill and Joanna Westcott are here. Thank you for being here. Jane McCallum from the Marshall Foundation is here someplace. See you. We also have some of our faculty members and members of the administration. Ken McAllister, Professor of English and Associate Dean of Research in the College of Humanities is back here. Monica Casper, who has a vested interest in this presentation, and Professor of Gender Women Studies and Associate Dean of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences is here. And other faculty, please identify yourselves. We have a number of faculty from different colleges. Welcome. Thank you. And also Lidia Otero, Professor Lidia Otero from the Mexican American Studies Department, who's going to be doing our presentation next month here about barrio stories here at the playground. So we're really excited that you're here. Thank you for coming. So let me talk about the work of Professor Bill Simmons. And he is a true scholar of human rights and a global authority in this field. Not only as a scholar and a theorist, but also as an activist and a connector of many different groups of people working on this subject. In his 3 years at the U of A, as Associate Professor in Gender and Women Studies, he has published a book titled Binational Human Rights, the U.S.-Mexico Experience. He has taught human rights in the Honors College, traveled the world for conferences and presentations, and now has led the development of the revolutionary website, globalhumanrightsdirect.com, and you'll hear more of that work in just a minute. Prior to the U of A, Bill was at Oregon University up north for a number of years. Luckily, he made the right decision and he joined us. And he established a master's program in social justice and human rights at ASU. He maintains ties in Phoenix as the president of the board for the Lost Boys Center for Leadership Development, an organization that assists in resettling former lost boys of Sudan and offering job training and language education. Bill's interdisciplinary approaches to research, teaching, and community outreach exemplify the kind of work that the Conference Center values and supports. We're proud to introduce his work to you tonight. Bill, welcome.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. It's wonderful to be here at the playground. I want to thank some people. I know Javier thanked a lot of people, but we have members of the Global Human Rights Direct Committee who are here. Ken McAllister was the co-PI on the grant and is the programmer in residence for this project. Ethna Lufheid is a committee member. Caitlin Murphy is here somewhere. Okay, hey Caitlin. Gabriel Acosta, who is an undergraduate student finishing up, and he should be working on his honors thesis right now, but he's not. Gabriel has been helping out with the project, and I assume there's one or two other people here who have been working out with the project. This is a team approach. We have 15 faculty, we have community members helping out, we have students, we have staff. So it's really an honor to be here tonight to unveil this. I'd like to thank the Confluence staff who've been wonderful. And I've been told by Javier that the first 2 rounds of drinks are on him. Okay, so, oh, that wasn't at this event. Sorry, Javier. Okay, that's tomorrow. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to do 3 things in this presentation. This is a website to bring people from around the globe together for human rights. And so what I want to do is talk about the website itself a little bit, show it to you. One of the great things about the website is it helps you set up video conferences from around the globe with human rights folks. And so after I talk for about 5 or 10 minutes, we will shift to a Skype conversation with one of the members of the Lost Boys from South Sudan, and he'll tell you what we are working on in South Sudan. He's in Phoenix right now, so we're not keeping him up real late. He's not in South Sudan dodging bullets, thankfully, right now. And then third is we're going to do a participatory exercise. This website is designed so that it will develop organically. So we want the users of the site to tell us what they want, and we will implement it. So there's a lot of things on the website which will allow the users to offer input as to what they need, and also to put in data, put in things in archives and other things to make the site more robust. So in that spirit, we're going to do a participatory exercise with all of you tonight. Okay. So first of all, the brief history of the site. I've been blessed in my career teaching human rights to have traveled to a lot of places, and I've met a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who are judges in human rights courts. I've met a lot of survivors of torture, political prisoners. I've met perpetrators. I've hung out with people who've been torturers. I've met government officials from Zimbabwe and other places who are, have done some really bad things. I've met people who are changing the world. Hopefully, most of them are changing it for a good way. And when I meet them in different countries, I'll say, oh my goodness, this is incredible to meet you. This is incredible to talk to you over drinks. But you know what? I would love for you to meet my students. My students are covering the issue of the genocide in Rwanda next week, and you are a survivor of the genocide. Would you be willing to Skype into my class? And almost everybody I've ever asked that question has said yes. And they've almost always been surprised that, you mean your class in Arizona would like to actually talk to me? I'm like, oh my goodness, of course they would. And my students have gotten such great experiences talking to judges, talking to survivors, talking to activists, talking to indigenous leaders. I mean, it's been really incredible, and I've loved it. I've learned so much. So what I would tell my colleagues that in other departments, and I say, you should do this. And they say, well, how do we even get started? I don't know these people. I don't know who's willing to do this. I don't know the technology or anything like that. And so we came up with the idea of having a speakers bureau for video conferences for human rights. And that was kind of this grand vision that we started with. And we thought that was going to be pretty revolutionary, to bring people into the classroom, bring people into your church meetings, bring them into your community meetings who actually are on the ground working on this, on human rights issues. And so that's what we started with. And thanks to the Confluence Center, they gave us a seed grant to work on this project. But as we started programming the site, we realized that the software that we needed to do the video conference aspect actually had all the social media functions that you would ever want. And we realized that there really wasn't a go-to place for social media for human rights. So now it's morphed into basically 2 projects in one. The first is a video conference speakers series, and the second is a social media site, like a Facebook site for human rights activists. And so now you can join, you can create groups, you can find friends, you can create events, you can create your own virtual webinars, you can put your movies up there, you can do all sorts of things with the website. So that's kind of the history of this. And the underlying goals of the project are just kind of ambitious. We basically want to change the way human rights is taught, what it means when we talk about human rights, who's considered an expert on human rights, and basically flip the human rights script. Human rights has been defined by white men like me who are teaching at Princeton or Harvard or Columbia, and they've kind of said what human rights means. And yet people have been defining human rights on the ground for decades. And they've been defining it in a way that fits their culture, their society, their problems. And so what we want to do is change what's counted as an expert in human rights. There are people who know a lot more than the human rights professors about human rights. And so we want to change what knowledge is brought into the classroom, what knowledge is brought into policy debates. We want to change what knowledge counts in human rights. We don't want victims and survivors to be seen as somebody we study, but somebody who we discuss with and we learn from. Okay? So that's our overarching goal. And by doing that, we hit all these other goals, right? So we'll start hearing voices that aren't normally heard. We'll start hearing issues that aren't normally heard. It's not going to be gatekeepers at universities determining what human rights issues are important. And finally, through these speaker fees and other parts of the project, we hope we can help sustain some of the NGOs and some of the activists, especially in developing countries. Okay? So if we can flip to the website itself. Okay. That's kind of confusing, but okay. So basically, this is the Global Human Rights homepage, and it's a Facebook page. So I have this is my account. So we have my new community activities, my new friends, my new messages, all that kind of stuff. We have featured events. You'll see that this event is actually just went off because it is started. So you can no longer join this event, so close the doors. Then we have featured profile pages on the right-hand side. And you'll be able to click on to any of those and go to their homepage. And it has all background information, links to publications. Also, it has speakers' fees, what technology they use, what languages they speak. And we're ultimately going to have translators, interpreters attached to the site. So if you don't speak the language, but you need a translator from, let's say, Swahili to English, we will have you'll hit Swahili, and a bunch of Swahili to English translators will come up. Okay? If we go to community, I think might be a good place to go. You'll see we have groups that and let's click on groups. You can just create groups very quickly, and you can create it on any human rights issue you want. And so my Human Rights Voices class that I started teaching today, I quickly created a group. It takes about 30 seconds or a minute to create a group. And if we scroll down, you'll see we've already created groups for about 15 different issues, an LGBTQ rights group, Black Lives Matters, etc. And you can join these groups. On the groups, you can share videos, share text, share links. You can have discussion boards, etc. And so when you come onto the site, you will search, do a mega search, and groups that of your interest will come up. Events related to your interest will come up. People who have in their profile page that interest will also come up. And then also videos and other kinds of art forms will come up. So if we go back up to community, and let's go to NGOs. So NGOs, non-governmental organizations, can create their own pages. And if we scroll down, we can click on the Lost Voice Center, which is a little bit further down. Okay, and if we click on Lost Voice Center, you might have to click on the text there. There we go. So we have a description of the center, a link to how you can donate, and then if you go down further, you have contact information, the contact persons for the organization, which will then go to their profile page so that you can hook up a video conference or you can friend them, related events, related profiles, related groups. Okay? And now if we can let's go maybe to the home page again. And by the way, the featured profiles are me right now, and you notice I accidentally made my picture the biggest. Monica Casper, who's here, is my wife, but is also a leading scholar of feminist health issues and reproductive rights issues. Najwa Napti, Najwa, are you here? Hi, Najwa. Najwa is a former prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia in The Hague, and an expert on sexual violence as a war crime. So you can go to her page or Javier's page, and Javier always talks about his Confluence Center activities. Javier is a leading scholar of cultural studies at the Mexico border and in Mexico. So if you wanted to bring him in, you could Skype him in as well. I'm going to leave that the site as is. There's so much more to explore. You register for the site. You can then friend people. You can create groups. You can connect with people around the world. Okay. So if we can maybe go to Skype. Maybe Maggie, if we go to let's go back to the PowerPoint and just do the South Sudan thing for a minute. That one slide. Okay. Let's start at this slide. So I could have shown a lot more on the site. The site is growing as we speak, but I wanted to show you kind of what the value added over other human rights social media sites. Right now, in human rights, and I would say in most fields, we have this incredibly networked society where we're all, we can do all these things with the internet, but for some reason we don't find each other, right? If we go to Facebook, we friend people we know, right? But we don't find people we don't know. Even though they're somewhere on Facebook, we don't do that. So what this site does over existing social media sites, there is no video conference speakers bureau for human rights anywhere in the world that we know of. Okay? There is no existing comprehensive list of human rights events. Think about that, right? So I can use this site, I can add my events. It takes a minute or two to add an event, and anybody in the world can find out about the event. If it's a virtual event or a hybrid event, they can join the event. There's no existing database of human rights videos. There's no easy way to connect with human rights folks that you don't know. There's no easy way to create groups or subgroups. So we see this basically as replacing listservs and Google Groups and some of the other things that are used. There's no easy way to make virtual events. Okay, if you're not attached to a campus, it's pretty hard to do a webinar, or if you're not attached to a Fortune 500 company. Okay, so right now, you'll be able to create webinars, you'll be able to create virtual conferences. There's no easy way to publicize your issues, your NGOs, your videos, if you're a documentary filmmaker. And especially, there's no easy way, if you are one of the marginalized people, that you can bring your issue to the forefront. And all of this can be done quickly, and it can be done by the user themselves, so that the users will create the content for this. And then, so users are also engaged in developing the site. There's a way through our blog attached to this that they're able to offer suggestions. So, next slide. And what I want to do is give you an example of the power of video conferencing for human rights and talk about the Lost Boys from South Sudan. Many of you know about this issue, but between '83 and 2005, there was a war between South Sudan and North Sudan. And in South Sudan, the boys were targeted, and they suffered immensely. They were forced to leave their villages and march towards Ethiopia. When they got to Ethiopia, they settled in refugee camps. Ethiopia then underwent a civil war, and so these boys had to march back through South Sudan, where they were harassed by animals. They faced starvation, faced dehydration, and they faced bombing by the North Sudanese military. The peace agreement was signed in 2005. Meanwhile, about 20,000 Lost Boys have settled in the United States. These Lost Boys, many of them are in Phoenix and Tucson. The biggest Lost Boys center is in Phoenix. I happen to be president of the board of directors for that organization. Very blessed to do that. When the new country of South Sudan was created in 2011, we decided that we would change our focus as the Lost Boys Center from helping the boys develop in the United States to how can we help back in South Sudan. And so we have purchased land, we are building an educational facility, and I'm very blessed that on Skype, we'll be joined by Kuala Wan, who is the Executive Director of the Lost Boys Center, and is one of the most famous of the Lost Boys. In fact, at the, when the independence was declared in 2011, BBC did a film where they followed Kual back to his home. And it was the first time he'd been back to his village since he'd left as about an 8-year-old boy. So Kual it should be at home and joining us.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi Kual, hey, how are you?
Hey Bill, how are you?
I'm doing well. Do you have your video on?
It is on.
Oh, we're not seeing you. Ah, there you go. Ah, here we go. Okay, still not getting your video. We have your picture. It's trying to get your video.
Hold on a second, I think I need light.
We have a theory among video conferencing for human rights is that the further away the person is from you, the better the connection will be. And that if you're Skyping with somebody in your town or in Phoenix, that you have more trouble because they don't spend as much time kind of prepping everything and you just assume it'll work. But then if we Skype, like Kual and I Skype back and forth from South Sudan all the time, and we never have these issues. So Kual, are you there again?
Yeah?
Okay, and do we have light?
Yeah, this one there.
Okay. We always thought Phoenix was the dark side, didn't we? Well, are you starting the fire? There you go. Hey. Hey.
See me?
Kual, we are here at the playground. We're at the playground in Tucson, downtown Tucson, and
then this video camera's
we are so happy and fortunate for you to join us. And I know that we have an abbreviated time for you to talk about kind of your story. And just for the audience, I wouldn't do this for anybody else, I think, except Kual, because Kual and I have worked together for 7 or 8 years. And I wouldn't force anybody else who was a lost boy or a survivor to talk about their story in 5 minutes. But I think Kual understands what we're doing and has agreed to this. And I'll probably have to buy him a drink at some point for this. So Kual, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your story, your background in South Sudan and how you ended up in the United States?
Sure. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Bill, for putting this thing together. As he said, it's a long story, but I will try to make it brief. I was born in South Sudan, which is a country in Africa, and I was born in a more of a rural village. Most of the time, that's where I was. But South Sudan as a country had the war that had been going on for a long time. But in 1983, the war that brought me to this end started in 1983. And what happened was, it started as differences between the North and the South. North is more dominated by Arabs, people who believe in Islam. And South is dominated by Africans, people who believe in Christianity, and also they also have African gods. So which is, some believe in call lion their god, some call snake their god. You can name all that they can claim to be their gods. So, but in 1983, when the war broke out, it didn't go to our villages. Because we in the village, we didn't even know if there was a war in the country. Because, life in the village, you only know where you live. But in 1987, the government, which was located in the north, the government of Sudan decided to, in order to defeat the rebels that were fighting them from the south, they decided to go to the villages and take young boys and also young girls and take the girls as slaves in the north, and also the boys who were recruited into army and also converted to Islam. So when that happened, most of the villages, they resent that, and the government started bombing the villages and burning them down. So to bring it to myself, we used to count Mondays on when we see the moon. So later on, we become to learn that it was like November 1987 when my village was attacked. And when the village was attacked, it was attacked during the day. And my job at the time when I was a little boy was, just to eat in the morning, and then around 9, 10, we would take cows and goats to the river, which is the River Nile, so that the cow can graze and drink, and then we bring them back later on in the evening. So that day we went with the cows in the morning, but in the afternoon, the helicopters started coming to the village and dropping the soldiers and dropping bombs in the villages. So we had those sound of the guns while we were away, and we decided to bring cows back to the village. But the situation was tough. So we were not able to go back to the village. So we left the cows and we started running to the south of the village. So there were 5 of us in that group that I was in. So we ran to the south and we're thinking that we would be back to the village later on when things settled down. They didn't settle, so we spent days just kind of hiding in the bushes. And then a few days later we learned about, there were one soldier that came and he was among the rebels that were fighting the government. And their base was in Ethiopia, which is another country in the east of Sudan. So he told us that if you guys follow me, the things will be okay. So that was the beginning of a very long walk. So, and the walk was not, we were not using car or airplane or any other means of transportation. We were walking. We walked for days. Some of the kids were eaten by the animals, and some were, they got exhausted, and we left them there. They died. And some were not able to make it based on, their food were out, and some were also were not able to find the location that we were going. So it took the group that I was in about 3 months, and then we reached to the first refugee camp in Ethiopia that we started in 1987. It was called Fanyit. It was on the west side of Ethiopia. So we settled in that camp, and the UN came along and supported us in that camp. We stayed in that camp from 87 to 91. And in 1991, the Ethiopians had their own civil war, so the government in that country was toppled or was kicked out by the rebels. And we were forced again to run, so we crossed back to South Sudan in 91. And it was more brutal than what we did when we left home, because we were kicked out at gunpoint, and a lot of kids. There was one time we were attacked. We were crossing the river, and a lot of people drowned in the river. It's called River Gilo, if someone might have read it before. We came down to South Sudan in 91. And we stayed in the border for a few months. Then the government of Sudan learned about it, and then they started bombing the camp that we were in at the border. So we crossed the country, and we walked for a few months, and then August of 1992 we crossed into Kenya, and we started a camp called Kekuma, which is still there up to now. That was 1992. So we stayed in that camp from 1992 until 2000. But what happened in 1998 in East Africa, when the U.S. embassies, one in Kenya and one in Tanzania, were bombed by terrorists, the U.S. government started having interest in East Africa. and they found out about the camps that we were in that was dominated by most of young kids, the Lost Boys. The name Lost Boys was not popular then, but after 98, the U.S. and the journalists and FBI, CIA, kidnapped any investigating team to the camp. And one of the journalists titled his article Lost Boys based on the number of the boys that were available in that camp. Didn't know where to go and didn't know where their parent was. So when they came back to the U.S., that report was done, and then it was presented in the Congress by the Christian group and other groups that were advocating for us to be resettled in the U.S. So in 1999, the U.S. government took it on. That was during Clinton time, and they approved it. And then what they do with migration is that they send. I know there's a lot of discussion now about people coming in and all that, but then when we were in that camp, what happened was they sent the lawyers, the immigration lawyers, and they went and did the interview. So you write the story of what brings you to the camp, and where your family is, all the things that I'm saying right now. And then they brought them back here. They used, the so-called Homeland Security now used to be called INS. So they did that interview. So personally, I got a visa to come here June of 2001. That was June 9. I was accepted June 9, that's when I received the letter. And then I left the camp June 12. And I arrived here on June, that was June 12, and then I arrived here the following day. And I went to Salt Lake City, Utah. So coming to the U.S., when we were about for a BP here, it was very exciting and also a lot of expectation on us because this country is a great country. So anybody outside there who is struggling, they always hope if they come to here, they can do well, which is true because most of us are doing well right here now. So I arrived in the evening. So we arrived around 4 in the morning to New York, JFK. And it was like, we found a lot of people working in the airport and we didn't know why a lot of people are just moving around in the airport. So we waited until around noon and then we took another flight to Denver. And then we arrived at Salt Lake later on in the evening. And the life in the camp is more of village life, so you don't know what to do with if you are put in the apartment. Some of us, I was happy because I went to the high school in the camp, so I was able to read few things here and there. So I was a little bit better than some of my colleagues. So I can read things. So we were not able to turn on the ovens because we think if we turn it on, it may burn down the whole apartment. So there were a lot of things that we were not to do. Even some didn't know how to turn on the lights. So, but coming to the U.S., there was huge expectation. And so when we got here, we were introduced to stay in our own apartment. While in the camp, we used to stay as a group. We used to stay in an open area or we build our own huts and stay in them as a group. But in an apartment, you will stay with 2 or 3 people. And then everybody will be distant that you don't know. So the struggle in the U.S. was not about food like it was in the camp. Because in the camp it was about where to get food and other basic needs. But in the U.S. it was more about where do I find the direction, where do I find the bus station, if I wanted to go to school, where do I take the application to do that. So those are the struggles that we had. And in terms of, in terms of food and all that, there were cultural shocks, so you don't know what kind of food to eat, how things are done here, even walking on the street. In South Sudan, we tend to walk a lot on the left side, here people walk on the right side. So you bump into people once in a while. So, but things got, we got a lot of volunteers came along. For me, it started as a volunteer from Church of Mormon, the Mormon church. There were 2 elders who had been the mission at the age of 65, 64. And they ran into our apartment one day. And they found there were 6 of us in the apartment. And they were starting talking to us about the mission that they were coming for. But at the end, it was not mission anymore because they realized we don't even looking for to be converted to anything, but we need basic services to function here. So they became our friends. They were able to take us to job search, to find jobs through them. They started introducing us to the school system, plus the agencies that brought us here. So I was able to start school that year in June, not in June, in August. And then I started at community college there. Then I did 2 years of community college, then moved on to University of Utah. And be able to, in 2006, I was able to finish my undergrad bachelor degree in psychology. And I worked for a year in 2008. I was able to move here to work for the center that I run for the last 5-6 years. The Lord Center was founded at the time that we were coming in here in Phoenix to help the group that was here. And it was to help them with the basics, basic things like, how to wind up, so all those things that we functions of the center. And here 2011, South Sudan became independent. And then the Lost Boys became Americans and they assimilated the system, and the center was relevant, but it was not relevant like the way it was in 2002, 2003, 2004. So we decided to change our mission to focus that in South Sudan so that other kids that are still struggling in South Sudan cannot fall into what we went through. And so as we speak, we are building the center in Juba, which is the capital of South Sudan. Last summer I was there for 6 months, and then I was working on building the center. And the center is an education center, so it will do a lot of things. It will work with human rights activities, vocational training, and a small skill that can help that population. That's what we wanted to take back. We call it paying it forward because, was what this country has given us. We wanted to give it to other people that need it the most. I know we can make a difference in this country like most of us are doing, but I think we can make a lot of difference in South Sudan where people don't have a lot of resources. And we, people who are suffering at the time, and got an opportunity to come here, are now the lucky ones that have got education and the resources that a lot of people don't have. And the best way we can help them is to go back and be able to help them. So with that idea of building the center, it came along through what we have seen on the ground when I went back for independence of South Sudan, plus some of my colleagues that have been there before. And most of the lost ones, some of them went back. So it's a way that we want to help as a collective group and have a space where we can also connect with people here and also be able to help people over there. So that's what we are doing right now. And I will not be able to hear all of you when you ask questions. But the best we can do is, if you have any question, I will be happy to ask.
Okay.
And then we can move on from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Kowal didn't mention, but he also has a master's degree in social justice and human rights from ASU. And his master's thesis, which I was fortunate to be on the committee, was on domestic violence training for the Lost Boys themselves. How do you treat women in the United States? How are you supposed to treat women? And he did training programs for the Lost Boys in Phoenix on domestic violence. And I think that says a lot about Kowal as to what topic he picked. So, Kowal, also, I think you mentioned that a lot of people didn't have a chance to come over to the U.S. After 9/11, the refugees from the Kakuma camp were no longer allowed in. And so many of them stayed in those camps until 2005 or 2006. Some then went back to South Sudan. Some have since, because there's a civil war going on, been forced to go back to the Kakuma camps. So Kowal is one of the lucky ones. And there were Lost Boys who just never made it to the United States, never had all those opportunities. So we're trying to help those kinds of men. So questions for Kawal, maybe a couple questions. Oh, sorry. Questions? So I'll ask one question since everybody's. Kawal, what do you need for the Lost Boys Center as far as what can these people do to help the Lost Boys Center in the coming year?
Well, as we speak, like I said a minute ago, is that we are now building the center in Juba. And so between now and what we need is we need resources to be able to build that center. And the resources cannot only be money, it can be, we have been broke down to a lot of things, so we need volunteers. If anybody is willing to go and to South Sudan at some point and be able to help over there, that's another resource we need. Apart from money, that is definitely something needed to build the center. We need a very good amount of money to be able to build the center. Also over here, we still have a community here. The Lost Boys, the name implies that Lost Boys, but really we are young men. If you look at the average age for us, it's around 30 now, 35. So we are, we have families and we have a community that is also needs services here. So we also need volunteers. You can volunteer in so many ways. People can volunteer to be on the board. People can volunteer to teach ESL at the center. And people can volunteer to organize resources in their own community. You can do something in your own local community and invite us to come and speak. And it's something that can support the center. And then those things are the things that we need right now.
Any other questions for Kawal? Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Kawal. Have a good evening. Thank you. Okay. So the third activity we have, and I know we're kind of running out of time, is in front of you. You probably have a two-sided sheet. As I said, the Global Human Rights Direct project is developed particularly to be organically grown. We want this to be as most helpful for human rights folks around the globe as possible. We don't know what they want. It's not like, we can't say that our ethos is to hear other people's voices and then develop a site that we think they want. So the idea is to develop what people want. And so on here you see, I think 6 different prompts asking you questions about who would you want to bring in? What issues would you like to see focused on there? What are some really interesting uses of the site that you can think of? And some of the most interesting parts of the site have been coming out of other people's ideas. And we borrow them, but we give them credit as well. So, we definitely, as we finish up, get some drinks, walk around, talk to people, talk to them about your human rights interests. I see people all around who are leading people in different areas in human rights, and some really interesting folks are here. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions. One, who can join your site? Who can join your site, and do you filter for non-relevant posting or content?
Yes, first, who can join our site? Anybody can join our site. You can go to our site and it says register on the front page, and you'll go straight to our registration page, fill out some information about yourself. We do approve everybody. We don't want people who aren't who they say they are. So we don't want somebody saying they're Barack Obama or something like that, right? And we do, look into that. We do make sure, it is, we do a little bit of vetting there. And then the second question was, yeah, definitely, yeah. We filter for non-relevant content. We have to approve all videos that are posted. We approve all events, all groups, all that kind of stuff, we do approve. Yeah, we, Facebook and some other sites, you just get so much stuff that's irrelevant. And we don't want this to be, where we just keep passing on memes over and over and over like Facebook. The snark is interesting, it's good for Facebook. But we want this to be a serious place to listen to people's voices and to connect with people. So, other questions about the site and our vision for it? Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about the immediate future of the project? I know you have some ideas about a sustainability plan. I think it'd be interesting for people to learn more about that.
Thank you, Javier. Yeah, we have some funding from the Confluence Center, which will take us to about June. We need then to have funding to sustain the site. We're going to, we're pursuing several different strategies. One of which is to go to granting agencies and say, you're interested in, let's say, LGBTQ issues. We will feature LGBTQ issues for the next month. We will get profile pages up there. We will get background information. We will do a webinar or two on that issue. But you need to pay us to support a grad student or two to do continued programming, things like that. We also, so that's kind of one strategy. It's kind of to keep this at a smaller scale, to keep this kind of in the human rights field. We also have some ideas about once we get the site built out the way we want it and really nice, we have ideas about cloning the site for other issues. So that instead of Global Human Rights Direct, we might have a site for Global Public Health Direct. We might have a site for Global Economic Development Direct. We might have a site for Global Political Science Direct, Global Gender Studies Direct, something like that. That's another whole nother level. That's something we're talking with Tech Launch at U of A about. But I would say, when we said value added, that there's no place for all events, there's no place for all videos, there's no place for Speakers Bureau for virtual video conferences. I would say that applies not just to human rights, it applies to public health, it applies to economic development, it applies to commercial law, it applies to dozens of different fields. And we think there's a lot of fields that would benefit by getting the knowledge of people on the ground instead of the people who are the elites. And so that's kind of our long-term vision, is to have some kind of site like that, or a series of sites where each of them deals with a separate issue, and you could subscribe to as many of those sites as you'd like. Thank you, Javier. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What about exposure to public school systems and other force multipliers?
Yeah, as far as getting the word out. Yeah, we're kind of doing a soft launch right now, where we're trying to keep it within people we know, people, through events like this. We're getting a lot of media exposure here. But once we really get this where we want, many of us are on human rights education listservs. Many of us are connected to the Arizona Social Science Educators Association, things like that. And we will be sending out email blasts and doing show and tells like this for a lot of groups. And we hope to have booths at conventions and places like that. And as we travel, we will be talking to more people and getting them excited about it. And with 15 or 16 members of the committee, all of them have huge networks in human rights fields. And then we're also handling an international advisory committee, many of whom have hundreds of contacts. And so we think that this will go viral pretty quickly. Advertising is cheap and basically free on the internet. We will post videos and parts of videos from the conversations that develop on YouTube. And so we'll have a 3-minute version of Kual talking. And then at the end it will say, if you'd like to have Kual come into your classroom or into your meeting, go to Global Human Rights Direct, go to his profile page. So yeah, so we have a lot of marketing strategies, but we could we'd love to hear more. So if you have ideas about how this can be marketed, please let us know. Other questions? Well,
You're housed within funded by the Confluence Center for now and housed within University of Arizona. Do you intend to stay at the U or spin off more independently?
excellent question. We don't know. We don't know. I mean, we want to do what's best for the ethos of the project. So, you know, we want to have this still be a place that the voices of marginalized people get heard. We want to make sure that happens. And if that happens best under U of A, you know, that's strongly considered. But if, you know, it could happen with a startup company or a company that does social media websites, you know, as long as we can ensure that the ethos stays the same, I mean, we would entertain things like that. Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting, you know, it's an interesting process. Somebody asked me how it was to lead this, and I said, well, imagine, have you ever worked with programmers? And they said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And then I said, have you ever worked with faculty members? And they said, oh, yeah. And I was like, you know, I mean, there's great pleasure in doing both of those, but they have their own challenges, right? And a lot of this has been developed by students in classes. A lot of this has been developed by activists that we've talked with. And, you know, we've done this on the fly. The grant from Confluence was generous, but it's not, you know, it's not something that, you know, none of us are getting rich off of this. So if you know, the idea of having a team of programmers working on this sounds really interesting to me right now.
Have you thought about having a team at Hack Arizona?
Yeah, that would be wonderful to do something like that, yeah. To work with Hack Arizona, I think that would be wonderful, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I think there'd be all kinds of possibilities. And I don't know how to connect. I mean, I know that we just did a hack event at U of A in journalism, and it turned out beautifully, and I don't know how to get on their agenda and things like that. So,
I'm from the library. We let them have the science library. Like being kids, you just go to Hack Arizona, you can get hold of Ian, and the thing will be is to try to find the students that want to build a platform based on this as part of the competition.
yeah, that sounds wonderful. That would, I mean, we'd love to get those kinds of ideas that would develop out of that. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. So you have a sheet in front of you. We'd love it if you fill it out. Please, you know, hand it in right before you leave, or email us some of your ideas. Even, you know, be as creative and as wild and as innovative as you'd like. We keep hearing ideas that we just never would have thought of. A friend of mine talked to an indigenous leader up in Alaska, and he said, could I use this to have our Friday night fires as video conference so that the people who've gone off into the cities could join our Friday night fires again? And as a white man, I would never have even thought of that or even tried to broach that. I mean, what a colonial idea. I'll tell you why you do your indigenous thing through video conference. But it sounds so much different when he comes up with the idea. And so they're really excited that the site is live and so that we'll be able to do things like that. And I'd like to have a virtual room that will be permanent, that will be an indigenous talking circle. So that if you're interested in doing some kind of mediation, some kind of group discussion, you could just go to our virtual room. That will be an indigenous talking circle, and we would have indigenous leaders who do mediation through the talking circles. So we have all kinds of out-of-the-box ideas that we really want to implement. So please be as creative as possible. Get excited, get passionate. You know, what would you like this site to look like 2 years from now? What would be your dream if you could talk to anybody around the globe on social justice issues? Who would you want to hear from? Who would you like to learn from? What groups would you like to connect with? So that's what we'd like you to do, and we'll be here and we'll be chatting with you about it. So thank you very much. And
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to give out some prizes.